Hey guys, how are you all? Today we are BCK with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was chosen to repopulate the Uzumaki clan with the strongest Kunoichi? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Only one survivor? Sarutobi here is inside, letting the report fall back onto his desk. And this scroll contains all of her clan's belongings, Hokage-sama. There wasn't much, as they were a small clan to begin with, but I felt it wise to ensure she would have it all, if only to prevent enemies from taking advantage, Sarutobi Asuma explained. Indeed, very well. You said she had Chunin-level chakra reserves? Yes, though I don't believe she's been trained very much in it. If she wants to become a shinobi, she'll need extra tutoring to catch up with the rest of her age group. Unfortunately, she might not get a choice, if only to be able to protect herself. For now, the details of her clan is to remain a secret. Very few people knew about the Hakuryu clan to begin with, and it's best to keep it that way. I will return her clan's belongings to her once she's been settled into the village. Hiruzen nodded, more to himself than his son. I will tell you this now, that clan usually had wind affinities, so if you could spare an hour or so a week to give her tips should she prove to have it. Asuma's lips twitched. Trying to get me to change my mind about a genin team, old man? Well, of course, how you feel about taking a genin team is up to you, Hiruzen chuckled, but I prefer my Junin to actually care about the team they're assigned. Good work on the mission, Asuma. You may go. As a pile of leaves fluttered to the ground in Asuma's place, Hiruzen sighed, the words he'd left unspoken weighing heavy on his mind. The Hakuryu clan had been virtually unknown to those who focused on the Uzumaki of Uzushio. The Hakuryu had also been part of that village, smaller in numbers than their red-headed counterparts but no less fierce. If that girl inherited the powerful Kekkei Genkei of her clan, he would much prefer it to be within Konoha, where he could protect her from the greedy hands of the council, and she could learn to use it safely, become a valuable asset to the village. Perhaps it was time to give Naruto some information about his mother and heritage, and hopefully help him make a friend his own age. It took her a long time to remember what happened, and what was going to happen. Myra Rickson had died, and been reborn as Hakuryu Kanan, where she'd spent her 11 years learning about the new world she'd been born into, one all too familiar world she'd known as Myra. She'd found that her memories of her past life could be fragile things, sometimes being lost as she lived in the present, but they always found their way back eventually. Sharing the same shade of sapphire blue hair as her father, with her mother's golden eyes, she was as different from her past self as could be. Her clan shared blue hair of varying shades, with eyes ranging from sea green to a brown so dark it looked black. Kanan had lived in peace with her small clan. She'd learned they had once belonged to Uzushio, but some had managed to escape the slaughter. Her parents, their siblings and children, a grandmother from her father's side and a grandfather from her mother's. Their grandparents had taught them in the ways of the clan, as shinobi, though mostly kenjutsu, taijutsu, and chakra theory. Kenjutsu and various other weapons were her clan's specialty, though they were skilled at combining it with ninjutsu. She just hadn't yet reached that stage. The summoning scroll shared by her clan members had been kept a secret for hundreds of years, the true secret behind their Kekkei Genkei. Dragons, of all elements, who granted their ancestors the gift of their power. Ironically, it was basically the same power she knew from yet another anime, and called the same, Dragon Slayer. The power of a dragon, given to a human, making its wielder stronger, faster, and more deadly than someone without it. She had it. She was the only one of the survivors. Now she was the only survivor. A doctor had explained to her what happened when she'd woken up in a hospital. Her nomadic clan had been attacked by a group of bandits, led by 3 Nukanen, who had killed them all, since they'd refused to call for help, to summon the dragons. A Konoha Junin by the name of Sarutobi Asuma, she knew that name had come, then, killed all of the attackers and saved her. Then he brought her back to Konoha. That had led her to this moment, dressed in a pair of hand-me-down leggings and tunic, with sandals just a little too big, standing outside the door of the Hokage's office. With a gentle nudge from the secretary, she pushed the door open, coming face to face with people she knew but had never met. "Ah, welcome, Kanan-chan," the Hokage greeted her. She bowed stiffly, wary as to what might be expected of her. From what she remembered, her Kekkei Genkei would considered a formidable asset, and it wasn't unlikely they would want her to become part of their forces. Either that, or to breed when she was old enough, and honestly she wouldn't put it past the so-called council to demand both. "Sit," the old man said, not unkindly. When she had done so in the provided chair, he leaned back in his. "You have my condolences for your loss, child. It is never easy to lose loved ones." She thought back to her father's hands, rough from a lifetime of hard work. Her mother's eyes, golden and glorious when she rose to her sister's teasing in order to bring a swift and decisive retribution. Her cousins' laughter as they trained together, played together. "Thank you," she said thickly, vision blurring only slightly before she forced the tears back. Hiruzen gazed at her with understanding, and only the smallest traces of pity, before he launched into business. "My son brought you to us, after his mission. I knew your clan, though in name only, and had we known there were survivors of Uzushio we would have offered all of you refuge. As it stands, you are welcome in Konoha. I can provide you with housing and an orphan's stipend, and there are many opportunities for training, should you need it." Kanan considered what the old man was implying, snippets of characters she had once known by heart, events that had left her wishing she could rewrite it completely. This would be her chance to do something about all those things, and she knew where to start. "What ages does your ninja academy teach?" "Your peers are just starting their second to last year," Hiruzen said. Thought she could see that he was pleased with her interest. "If you choose to join them, I will provide extra training for you to catch up on what you have missed, and once you've reached their level you would be transferred into the class." "I will do that," she said after a long moment. "My parents taught me about Uzushio and its allies, and since my homeland is gone, there's no better place to become a shinobi than Konoha." Kanan hesitated, then decided it was too important to ignore. "My clan's belongings." She blinked in surprise when the Hokage lifted a large scroll onto his desk. Asuma gathered everything and put it inside the storage scroll. Swallowing hard, Kanan nodded, accepting the scroll. It wasn't too heavy for her to carry, thankfully, and Hiruzen made a hand motion before she could even think about breaking down as the realization of her second family's loss began to sink in. A ninja with a bird-like mask appeared beside her, making her jump. "Take her to the apartment discussed earlier," Hiruzen commanded, tossing the Anbu a key. "I will finish the paperwork and other procedures personally." The Anbu nodded, and put a hand on Kanan's shoulder. In an instant they were gone, and Kanan stumbled, staring around at the apartment they were suddenly in. The Anbu nodded at her, then in a blur was gone. Stunned, she slowly closed the window behind them, then turned to see her new home. It wasn't a big apartment, she found. There was a combined small kitchen and living room area, with a small hallway that led to a bedroom, separate bathroom, and a walk-in closet area with a beat-up washer and dryer. The walls were a dusty tan, the floors plain wood. The tears came again, as she remembered her family's tent, covered in brightly patterned pillows, furs and rugs always underfoot. There had been tapestries hanging from the tops of the tents, the smell of Oba-sama's soup always present in that huge ugly pot she loved to use. They should have summoned the dragons, she thought bitterly, swiping at her tears roughly. But it was what it was. Sniffling, she put the large scroll on the ground and unrolled it, and began inspecting each storage seal one by one. It seemed that Asuma had taken the time to sort her family's things and label them by broad category. She made a mental note to thank him, for both the thoughtfulness and for avenging her family. At least they could rest in peace. Kanan started with the seal labeled, Household, pushing some of her chakra into the ink, the puff of smoke revealing even more scrolls, though these ones were smaller. They were labeled, too, blankets, pillows, cleaning supplies, clothes, cookware. She had to start doing laundry immediately, as many of the fabrics had been dirtied in the frenzy of the attack. Thankfully nothing was ruined. She might have broken down completely if she had to get rid of any of her family's things. With all the dirty laundry in that walk-in laundry room, she steeled herself and went through the rest of the storage seals. The scrolls with her clan techniques she went through to make sure nothing was missing. To her relief, she found the entire chest was intact and still had everything, including the precious summoning scroll. She put all that back in the scroll it had come in, and hid it under the loosest and most inconspicuous floorboard in the bedroom she could find, resolving to put more security measures in as soon as she could. The Hakuryu Armory scroll went with clan techniques, though she took out her practiced training weapons and the supplies to maintain them. The training scrolls she had been working from before the attack were stacked next to them. The next seal held personal belongings, which were the hardest to sort through. Minami Ba-san's shogi set, made of ivory with mother-of-pearl inlays. It had been a gift from her great-grandfather, and a precious family heirloom. Kanan and her cousins had spent hours vying for turns to play with her using the beautiful set. Tu-san's necklace with a seashell pendant, Ka-san's gold bangles with colorful seashell panel insertions. Akira Itoko's wooden animal sets that he'd carved himself. Little Miho Itoko's stuffed tiger, a birthday gift after she'd fallen in love with a picture of one from a storybook. And the storybook collection. Kanan had to set those aside quickly, overwhelmed with memories of the warm campfire, cuddled up to each other while Oji-sama read to them all, doing all the different voices and making the children giggle and gasp as the story came to life before them. It hurt to see everything, reminders of all that had been stolen from her, just when she thought she could live peacefully with the people she loved. But she knew that to forget was not an option, so she would be proud of the people who had been. Even if it hurt to see their things without them. To be reminded. A knock on her front door interrupted her thoughts. Wiping her face, she let her curiosity take over and bring her to the door. Opening it, she came face to face with brilliant blue eyes. She then noticed the whisker marks on the boy's cheeks and recognized him. "Hey, Gigi said that there was someone new moving in, but I hadn't thought he meant today, but then I heard you moving around so I figured you must have moved in already. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, Datbeo." "Hi," she said with a small smile, soaking in the cheerfulness he was radiating. He just looked so excited that he had a new neighbor, it was kind of sweet. "I'm Hikaru Kanan. Nice to meet you, Naruto-kun." He beamed at her, then seemed to deflate a bit, his eyes flickering around uncertainly. When he didn't say anything else, Kanan opened the door a little wider. "Would you like to come in? I'm still sorting some things, but we can talk if you want. I'm new to Konoha," she added, hoping he'd agree, wanting to be distracted and not alone while she went through the most painful memories. "Really? You don't mind? I could use some company," she admitted. From there it didn't take long to get him settled on the floor of the apartment, making small talk while she tried to be quick about sorting out her family's things. But Naruto couldn't help but ask questions, totally oblivious to the way she described her family in past tense, eagerly listening as she told him stories about the people who owned each thing. Tamaki Ji-san's harp, only about a foot in size, that he used to dance around camp with while he played. Nami Ba-chan's marionettes, the ones she would use to put on little plays with Oba-sama for the children. She showed Naruto how they could work with normal string or chakra string, one of the control exercises she'd been taught, though she could only use 3 and only extend them about a foot or so. Then there were the books, collected from all across the elemental nations, fiction, history, comic books. Ka-san had been fond of a particular series about an adventurous rabbit who was joined by friends on a quest to save the kingdom from the manipulative advisor. She used to read it to Kanan all the time. After those came the handwritten books brought from Uzushio, which was also when she finally realized she could, innocently, bring up the connection and help Naruto learn about his heritage. "You probably had an Uzumaki parent or grandparent," she told him, after explaining the significance of the spiral on the book's cover. Uzushio, and the Uzumaki clan and its sub-clans especially, were allies with Konoha until they were destroyed a few decades ago, so they must have come here before that. Naruto traced the spiral with his fingers, eyes locked on his clan symbol. "I had no idea I had a clan." "Wait, what do you mean, sub-clans?" "Ah, so some clans are really close with others, sort of like Konoha's Yamanaka, Nara, and Akamichi clans, except sub-clans swear their loyalty to a stronger clan. They tend to be really friendly and family-like with each other, and they marry into each other's clans a lot. Not like the Uchiha or Hyuga, who only marry other Uchiha or Hyuga, see? Anyways, the Uzumaki were small in numbers, but they worked together with other clans in Uzushio so well that their teams became like family. So clans that were smaller than the Uzumaki clan would become sub-clans. They would usually follow with the Uzumaki clan head's decisions, she explained, after a minute of struggling to remember Oji-sama's history lessons. He'd been very adamant that the children knew all about the clan that he'd so respected. His wife had actually been an Uzumaki, though her red hair hadn't been passed on to any of their offspring. The Uzumaki would also protect their sub-clans, which is partially why they were nearly wiped out. They bought time for their sub-clans to escape the attack. That's how the Hakuryu clan escaped the Uzushio slaughter. So we were the protectors of Uzushio. Then, where's the rest of your clan? Kanan exhaled heavily, working her throat but having trouble actually speaking. We moved around the nations a lot, trying to lay low, but recently, there was a group of bandits, led by Nukanen. They killed everyone, even the smallest ones. I was checking the snares, I came back and all of them were. And the tears came again, drowning her voice as she tried to hide it behind her hands. She just felt stripped raw, remembering that awful day less than 2 weeks ago. The Nukanen had set fires all around and throughout the camp with their jutsu, them and the bandits overwhelming the defenders with sheer numbers. A hand on her shoulder reminded her that Naruto was still there, and she took a few deep breaths, trying to control herself. Sorry, it's just been really hard, she whispered. It's fine. I mean, it's not fine that your family's gone. But it's fine that you're crying. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the crying part. Naruto scrambled to make sure he didn't offend her, making her laugh wetly. I get what you're trying to say. Thanks, she managed to smile a bit. In a way, it's nice to have you here. It's like finding a distant cousin. Oji-sama really loved your clan, you know? He married an Uzumaki, Kotori Obaa-sama. So we're sorta family, Naruto whispered. Kanan nodded, her smile growing. I think some of Kotori Obaa-sama's things are in these storage scrolls. I'm sure she would have been happy to let you have them. They are Uzumaki things. The look of mixed shock and joy on Naruto's face was well worth the emotional turmoil of going through her dead family's belongings. And when Naruto started actively helping, it went easier. They found the scrolls within a couple of hours. A set of taijutsu scrolls, the wave crest-styled Ka-san had said made the Uzumaki formidable opponents in close-range combat. And one ninjutsu scroll that she suspected was about the adamantine chains. There were more scrolls that were Uzumaki made but not clan restricted scattered through the training supplies, and she mentioned them, but Naruto said he wanted to focus on the Uzumaki specific ones first. Are you really sure I can have these? Naruto asked for the 4th time as they were finishing up that evening. Absolutely. They're practically your birthright, she said firmly, having just put the last load of laundry in the dryer. There were pillows and blankets draped everywhere, and on the furniture that Asuma had put into one of the storage scrolls, much like her family did when it was time to pack up or set up camp again. Thinking of any other ways to help her new friend, she mentally winced and apologized, but she had heard about him, and he was the best option. Though if you need help, I think I heard about someone you can ask. When I was in the hospital, some of the nurses talked about this shinobi called Maida Guy. They said he was super weird, but he's a taijutsu expert, so he'll know how to help you learn it from the scrolls. Naruto was about to reply, when there was a knock on the door. Motioning for him to wait a moment, she opened it slightly, immediately opening it all the way when she saw the Hokage. I see you've wasted no time saying hello, Naruto-kun, the old man chuckled, eyeing the scrolls on the ground curiously. Kanan-chan, is the apartment to your liking? Yes, sir, it's a good layout, she replied, stepping aside to let the Hiruzen in and offering him a seat on the cushy chair that Minami-ba-san had dragged all the way from Uzushio in her own special storage seal because she'd loved it so much. Anyo, Hokage-sama, I do have a question, though. I was just telling Naruto-kun about Kotori Obaa-sama, she was an Uzumaki too. Do you know which of Naruto-kun's parents or grandparents were from the clan? She knew she was putting the man on the spot, but it was innocent enough that she was confident she wouldn't get in any real trouble. Naruto was clutching his scrolls tightly, looking up at his Gigi with an expression of such fragile hope that she half expected Hiruzen to cave from that alone. Uzumaki Kushina, he sighed, meeting the young blonde's gaze, was your mother, Naruto-kun. She was a powerful kunoichi, but unfortunately that meant she had many enemies. I chose to keep your heritage a secret in an effort to protect you from those that would hurt you. The man's lips curled into a slight smile. You are very much like her, you know. She was a rather talented prankster. Naruto looked like he was either going to spontaneously combust with joy or collapse from newfound grief. His eyes fell to the scrolls in his hands, the only physical evidence he had of a family he never got to know. In a small voice that felt so out of place coming from him, he told Hiruzen about what he'd learned from Kanan, about the Hakuryu being a sub-clan of his, the stories of Uzushio she'd passed on. She was impressed he remembered them so well. She watched the expressions flit across the Hokage's face: old grief, nostalgia, amusement in a few cases. Then he turned to her, eyes surprisingly fond. "Thank you for sharing what you know with him, Kanan-chan." "It's his history too," she shrugged. And then she allowed herself to be asked about the things she had placed on the shelves, once again, and, third time's the charm, must have some merit to it. The initial remembering, telling Naruto, and then telling Hiruzen. It didn't hurt as much, though the pain would no doubt be there for a while. At the end of it, her mind had found a sense of peace, and it occurred to her to ask about something important. "Nay, Naruto-kun, do you live next door?" "Yeah, why? What part of your apartment is against this wall?" "The kitchen. Hokage-sama, who owns this building?" The man's eyebrows were raised. "Technically I do. Did you have something in mind for it?" "I was wondering if we could knock out this wall and connect our apartments," she shrugged, hiding a grin at Naruto's startled squawk. "He's basically family, so I thought it would be fun. Plus it would give us more space, and I wouldn't have to bother going into the hall to go see him. I kind of like the idea of having a shared kitchen and living room, like a real house. A house the rest of her family would never get to live in, but they could put up a shrine. A shrine for the Hakuryu, and for Kushina, and then when Naruto was allowed to know, Minato. In that case, I think I know a few genin teams who have some experience with construction. They ended up having to seal everything up again, not wanting to risk anyone breaking or nabbing something, while Naruto used the weekend to show her around the village. She'd shoved a black hoodie at him, wanting to give him a chance at anonymity, wearing a matching one, both with the pale blue spiral of Uzushio. Naruto had been so happy to have something with his true clan symbol that he hadn't even complained it wasn't orange. They spent hours wandering the village, with him showing her where everything was and what all the best places were. He took her to Ichiraku's, insisted she try ramen, and she managed to keep him quiet enough for them to both go into a bakery and get some fresh pastries that he'd never had before. By the time they got back in the evening, the genin team was gone, and there was a missing wall in between their kitchens, living rooms. Naruto's side was dirty. She'd just raised an eyebrow, sighed, and then taught him how to keep his rooms clean and why it was a good thing to do. Then she helped him make an actual meal, including his instant ramen, because even she couldn't make that big of a difference in a couple of days. Kanan couldn't help but be drawn into how expressive Naruto was, how bright his very presence was, the hidden depths that he went to such lengths to keep hidden for his own safety. But their living room was warm, the rest of the rooms becoming warmer as they spent more time together. An assurance that they weren't alone, that even though they'd lost everyone else they had each other now. It took 3 days for the genin team to finish joining their apartments, and in that time Kanan had learned some very important things. Naruto could be managed with massive amounts of physical affection. He was actually a joy to teach. She was helping him with his subpar reading skills, and helping him catch up to where he should be in his classes. When you bothered to find a way of teaching that worked for him, and he was eager to prove himself. He was also overwhelmed by having a house that looked like a home, with rugs and blankets and actual furniture, with wall hangings and pillows and a coffee table to study at, with snacks because she wanted to start getting him on the right track health-wise. But for the both of them, the best part was being able to say, "I'm home," and having someone to say, "Welcome back." "Alright Gaki, show me what you got." "Taijutsu first," Asuma grunted, making a beckoning motion with his outstretched hand. Kanan settled into the ready stance of her favored Tindu wyvern style. It was based on one of the lesser dragon clans, and not the strongest Hakuryu taijutsu style, but it was specially designed for children, using their size as an advantage, with sweeping arm movements inspired by the wing motions of actual wyverns. The style focused on sharp, powerful kicks, with strong arm strikes meant to send the opponent off balance, where chakra-enhanced toe jabs and full leg strikes could finish the job. Higher levels of the style used steel and chakra-reinforced sleeves to mimic the wings of a wyvern. Taking a deep breath, Kanan crossed the distance between her and her new tutor, twisting into a kick aimed to curl around his side to his kidney. Asuma dropped slightly and turned to the side to avoid it, striking out with his fists. She let herself fall onto her back leg, rising back up like a spring into a backflip and adding in a kick at his jaw. He knocked the kick aside, dealing 2 light blows to her stomach that still had her sprawling. She rolled to her feet, then engaged again. Kick, jab, duck, jab again, block. While Asuma's taijutsu style was strange to her, The rhythm of the fight was familiar and comforting. She could do this all day. After around 30 minutes, Asuma knocked her flat on her back and declared the spar over. "You've got good instincts, coupled with an effective taijutsu style, and you seem to have an excellent grasp on that. You should work on your speed and strength, though, probably best to do that with resistance seals," he mused, straightening and giving her a few minutes to rest. "Yugo said your kenjutsu and shuri kenjutsu was damn near perfect, so I don't need to see that. So let's get started on chakra control and ninjutsu. What have you learned so far?" "For chakra control I'm up to water walking, and a couple short chakra strings," she said, sitting up and mentally running through the training her clan had given her. "I know the Kawarimi, Henge, a lesser variant of the water bullet jutsu, and a water bunshin jutsu, as well as the summoning jutsu." She had already decided, she would not hesitate to use the power she had, not when her family died because they refused to. "Summoning? What contract do you have?" "Dragons. They helped found my clan, and have partnered with us ever since." "Kanan, if your family had such powerful summons, why didn't they?" "I ask myself that a lot," she interrupted him, rubbing at her eyes. "I know that keeping it a secret made us less of a target, but they just let themselves die. Let my cousins die, all because they had power they didn't want to use. But I'm not going to hold back and let the people precious to me die, not if I have the strength to stop it." Asuma hummed in thought, finally nodding. "I understand. Alright, do you know your affinity? Is it water?" Kanan shook her head. "All of us were taught at least one water release, and my older cousins were just getting into wind release before the attack. Water was difficult for me to learn, more than the others, but not overly so I'm not sure what my affinity is. We'll test that tomorrow, then, and I'll see what else I can teach you. Go ahead and do your stretches." While she did that to cool down from the workout, Asuma seemed to contemplate something heavily. She was grateful for his attention, though, as he had volunteered and called in a few favors to get a few other shinobi to get her up to speed for the academy and ensure she was prepared while gathering information for her file. At length, he gave a little shrug. "How are you adjusting to Konoha? It's a lively village," she murmured after a moment of hesitation. "Konoha allowed me to find a lost family member, and I feel like I can do the most good here. I haven't really met many people yet, but from what I've seen, even those who treated Naruto harshly had good points, loath as she was to admit it. Maybe her cousin's sunshine mentality was rubbing off on her. The people of Konoha are closely connected. It reminds me of home, in some ways. I think Konoha is a good place to become home. Because it wasn't, not quite yet. But it was getting closer with every day spent with Naruto." "That's right, your clan and the Uzumaki were like the Uzumaki and Senju," Asuma realized. "So you're related to Blondie?" Snorting, Kanan nodded, mind drifting to when she'd sat down with the old family tapestry that had the family tree woven into it. Kotori Obaa-sama had taken the time to weave her own family history into it, and using that and some of the heavily blacked-out records of Naruto's mothers they'd been able to find that Kotori Obaa-sama and Kushina Uzumaki had been cousins. Meaning that so were Kanan and Naruto. "We're second cousins, our grandmothers were twin sisters of the Uzumaki clan," she explained, voice slightly strained as she stretched. "Kotori Obaa-sama is my grandmother and the younger, she married into the Hakuryu clan. Himeno Obaa-sama is Naruto's grandmother. She was the clan heiress, and if the slaughter hadn't happened Naruto would have still been the clan heir." "Huh, small world. Congrats on finding him, then, kid. I heard you two had the wall between your apartments knocked out, I guess that's why." Grinning, Kanan nodded. It had been the best idea she'd ever had. They'd finally found a surprisingly intact bustedin for sale at a thrift store that they'd cleaned up and put in the now shared living room. Kanan had made the IHAI for their parents, she'd hidden the name plaque for Minato for now. While Naruto had found and fixed up frames for the 3 photos they decided to use in the little shrine, though there were still plenty that Kanan had to sort through. Currently on display were one of all the Hakuryu survivors, one of Ka-san and Tu-san, and one of Kushina that the Hokage had given Naruto. Every morning the two of them would pay their respects before parting ways, Naruto to the academy and Kanan to her tutoring sessions. She'd only just recently cleared the physical assessments, the last one being today, so Asuma had a bag of textbooks for her to study on her own time. She was supposed to meet with Iruka after she'd done all the assigned work so he could test her on that, too. Then see if she was ready to join the other students in their last year at the academy, which would start in 7 months. The only subjects she felt would give her trouble was history and writing. That was where her previous life's memories put her at a disadvantage, seeing as she'd lived in a Western country, and even with growing up again learning this new language she still had to focus when she wrote so it didn't come out as English. Maybe when she'd read over some code creating texts she could pass it off as a unique code, maybe teach it to Naruto. Having another language would be a huge advantage in their chosen career. After 3 in the afternoon she made her way back to the apartment, picking up some groceries on the way. Kanan had made a point of finding out what places were rude or refused service to her cousin, and then avoided them, choosing instead to use her stockpile of clan money to buy in bulk from the stores that let Naruto inside, taking a quiet pleasure in the way those stores lorded their higher profits over the others. Thanks to the storage scrolls she knew the basics of sealing, and studying Osamu's seals had improved her knowledge significantly. She was able to carry the supplies with ease. Kanan nearly bumped into a familiar boy with hair tied up in a high ponytail on the way back, apologizing to Shikamaru but not stopping. She had dinner to make for herself and her cooking-challenged cousin. Kanan. Naruto's voice dipped into whining territory as he flopped over the coffee table, careful not to touch the still drying ink of his handwriting practice. I know I have to make my writing better, but can I take a break? It's boring. He watched his cousin's face carefully, relaxing when there were no signs of a scolding. She shrugged, glancing at the clock hanging beside the kitchen window, and set a plate of cookies on the table as she claimed a cushion to sit on. Sweet, delicious peanut butter cookies, Naruto thought with a grin. Kanan knew so many recipes it seemed like she could use a different one for every meal every day and never run out. Most of them he'd never even heard of, but everything always tasted amazing. I know, but it'll help when you start working with seals. You've done enough for today, though, so you can break. Have a cookie, relax, and I'll help you with your homework later. You're the best, he informed her gravely, before grabbing a cookie and shoving it into his mouth like the disgusting heathen he was. Never let it be said that Uzumaki Naruto was stupid, because after just a few months living with Kanan his vocabulary had skyrocketed, and he'd become proficient in both sarcasm and the art of satire. Also his sense of humor had veered off into left field, but it had the bonus of making any derogatory comments towards himself practically useless. Why should he care what strangers said when he could make fun of himself just fine? They were wasting their breath and he would laugh at their pitiful attempts later. Kanan rolled her eyes at his actions, but her smile never left her face. Dork, you love me, he accused past a mouthful of cookie. I do, she agreed, taking one of the cookies before he could reach for another. I can't wait until I'm transferred into your class. I hope we're put on the same team. Imagine the chaos. Naruto knew that Kanan was still hurting badly from losing her family, their family. Despite his distance they would still have been his had they lived, but she'd recovered enough to show proof of her Uzumaki blood. She loved pranks as much as he did. Hers tended to be more baffling ones, though, like painting only the round signs in the village a neon green, leaving a trail to a beautifully crafted wooden shrine that only had a small frog statue in it. No one had been able to figure it out, which was probably the funniest part. It had driven some of the Anbu that always followed the blonde crazy, wondering if he'd somehow managed to set it up while being watched and they just hadn't noticed. Kanan was sneaky like that. I hope so too. None of my classmates really like me, so being on a team with them would suck, Naruto sighed. Over the past few months, he'd realized just how good it felt to have someone who loved him as he was, and it had led him to realize just how bad he was treated. It wasn't like he hadn't noticed before, but he guessed it hadn't really hit him fully until he had something to compare it with. It had also brought about the end of his crush on Sakura, once he realized that the girl was violent and scarily obsessed with Sasuke, and also had no interest in training. He'd actually started to get irritated with the pink-haired girl, who was just coasting along when he had to fight viciously for every decent grade. It was getting easier, thanks to Kanan's help, but he still struggled with book learning. He just didn't get the point of learning a bunch of names of dead people he was never going to meet. On the other hand, though, Kanan had taught him 2 solid clone techniques that he could actually use instead of the normal illusion clone. She said that the Uzumaki, and quite a few of the Hakuryu, just had too much chakra for illusion clones, and without having insane chakra control he would probably never be able to use the standard one. But the earth and water clones were much cooler, anyways, so he didn't care. Plus, Kanan had trusted him to be responsible with the duty he had accepted, signing the dragon summoning contract. Neither of them had summoned one yet, Kanan only because her personal dragon summon would no doubt rampage and destroy everything around once he'd learned what happened to the clan, and she didn't yet have access to a private training field where he could do so without disturbing the village. But she'd taught him about her Kekkei Genkai. Dragon Slayer sounded like both a gift and a curse. The power of a dragon, contained within a human body, something about that felt familiar but he didn't know what. Anyways, while he'd be able to pull off special techniques with whatever dragon became his personal summon, he'd never be able to use some of the abilities and techniques that Kanan had. He did wish he had fangs like hers, though, those were cool. Wait a sec, if Kanan was right about his henge being solid, why couldn't he just henge himself fangs? Iruka couldn't help but smile as he watched Naruto and his newly found cousin interact. He'd dropped by their apartment to go over some paperwork with Kanan, to prepare her for transferring into his class, and had found the young blonde he was so fond of sitting on a cushion with several scrolls laid out in front of him, a book in his lap. It didn't take long for Iruka to get over seeing the boy actually studying, even though it was still a shock. Lately Naruto had been paying more attention in class, and doing better on his assignments. After seeing the way Kanan answered any questions her cousin had, he no longer had to wonder how or why. It was only when he realized that she was teaching Naruto how to read some of the more complicated kanji that he realized, with a chilling sort of mild horror, that a main factor of Naruto's previous terrible grades was because he'd most likely been illiterate. It was a massive oversight on Iruka's part, and he guiltily promised himself to keep a better eye out for such things in the future. Setting that aside, though, he was impressed with Hakuryu Kanan. She was a bright young girl, and a sweet one, the type of student he was happy to teach. He did notice the glints of mischief in her eyes when Naruto would occasionally whisper something to her. Oh no, another prankster, but he hoped that she would help Naruto learn that there were times and places for everything, pranks included, just not during classes. As far as I can tell, everything should be set for you to transfer into the class next semester, he informed her with a smile. So just a few more weeks. I'll come get you both the day of classes, so have all your things ready early, alright? Yes, Iruka-sensei, Kanan bobbed her head in assent. This is going to be so much fun, Naruto gushed, twisting to sprawl out over his cousin's lap. She just looked down at him fondly, a stark contrast to pretty much everyone else in Konoha. Just try not to let the others rile you up so much, she told him, just the barest hint of a scold covered by warmth. You're catching up quick, but when you get flustered and upset your progress slows. And it's gonna take more time for them to see just how good you're getting, especially with those chains of yours. Iruka's eyebrows shot up to his hairline. Chains? My Kekkei Genkai, Naruto exclaimed, pride in every note of his voice. I got them from my mom, Iruka-sensei, she was an Uzumaki too and she was so cool, she was in the bingo book and everything. Hokage Gigi finally told me about her, her name was Kushina, and she was a Junin. Suddenly, a lot of things made a frightening amount of sense. I'm happy for you, Naruto, was all Iruka could say, because wow, he should have known, that frog prank was such a Kushina move. Actually the base for that trap had been taught to Iruka by the prank-loving woman herself during his first couple years in the academy. He felt like an idiot for not seeing it sooner. I'm sure she would be proud of you. And of course, that statement had the young blonde tearing up even as the blue-haired girl gave Iruka a mixed look of approval and yet reprimand. That girl was going to be formidable one day. Kanan looked over the class of genin hopefuls she was joining for the first time, but kept her thoughts away from her face as she slid into the seat next to Naruto. There were whispers already she'd been told that her presence was kept on the down low for security reasons, so most of the kids here had never seen her before, but she ignored them in favor of sharing a smile with Naruto, though his was like looking directly into the sun. She spared a glance at Mizuki. She'd been plotting ways to get him outed as a traitor before the end of the year, but she needed more information that she would only now be free to gather. She sort of wished she could tell Shikamaru and see how he dealt with it, but as she had no proof, well. The idea had merit, though. If she could pick out some behavioral patterns that pointed to something being off about him, the young genius might just do it for her. focusing back on the lesson, a review and lecture about taking things seriously, as it was their last chance to graduate and become genin. Kanan was relieved to find that she was actually a bit ahead. And with summer break giving Naruto more time to work on his wave crest taijutsu style, he had pretty much caught up to where he needed to be. They'd talked and decided that they would study more of the training scrolls that she had sealed up during the school year, hopefully giving them a good boost by the time the exam came around. The fact that she'd already taught him the water and earth clone jutsus meant that as far as graduation went, Naruto should be fine. But she mentally made a note to suggest they both work on getting at least the other 2 academy jutsus down to one-hand seal. And seeing if the Hakuryu scrolls had anything on Shunshin, and more chakra control exercises. Naruto was getting better with the tree walking, but she was pretty sure that he'd need a different one to work on whenever the water walking exercise made him too frustrated. Also, she probably should let him rifle through the armory scrolls to find a weapon he liked. Naruto was alright with kunai, but she could see that his natural form was suited to a bigger weapon with a longer blade. Not that he was bad with kunai and shuriken, as he proved during the hour of practice supervised by the teachers, but they just didn't mesh well with her cousin. Sometimes it just happened. Kanan's uncles had all been that way, and they used swords, or in one case a beautiful long bow with seal-tipped arrows. Naruto might love that, actually. He'd been practically devouring what few books and journals about sealing they had in the Hakuryu library. Settle down, class. Iruka's voice cut through her musings. We'll now be having spars, first the girls, then the boys. You know the rules, win by either knockout or ring out. First, Sakura versus Hinata, and Shino versus Kiba. Kanan did her best to keep track of both fights, impressed with Shino and Hinata's excellent control. Neither used any more force than necessary to win, while Kiba wasted energy with sloppy form and strikes, and Sakura just didn't have strength to speak of. It was kind of painful to watch the pink-haired girl try to show off for Sasuke, who wasn't even looking at her. Wishing Naruto luck when his name was called, she was stopped from watching his fight due to being called up to face Ino. The blonde girl gave a smirk that barely hid a sneer, probably something about her being close to Naruto. But Kanan just sunk into her starting pose after giving the other girl a once-over. Time to show the newbie her place, Ino told her little crowd of fangirls, all of which were weaker than the blonde in every way. Begin. Kanan lunged, feinting a wide punch before rearing back on her left leg and snapping out her right in a satisfactory wyvern whiplash maneuver, nailing Ino in the jaw and knocking her out cold. She wasn't even a master of the Tindu wyvern style, far from it. So that just drove home how unprepared so many of her classmates were for actual combat. Mizuki stared at her for a moment before declaring her the winner, and she trotted back over to the waiting area and watched the rest of her cousins spar against Choji. Naruto was giving a good showing, the acrobatics of the wave crest style's second stage giving a good impression to those watching, but since Choji had always been nice to him, they were both taking it easy. But it was obvious how much her cousin had improved. The other boys were watching with interest now. Iruka was hard-pressed to keep his smile from being obvious when he called time on the spar, congratulating both boys on their improvements. Naruto bounced over to Kanan, his usual chatter mercifully quieter to let the other students focus on their own spars. Did you see me, Kanan? I managed to get the whirl kick down this time, wasn't it awesome? I did, that was a good spar, she laughed softly. Honestly, she loved this boy. She'd be lost still without him. You've gotten much better, and I'm sure you'll be even better by the time we graduate. She raised her voice slightly, seeing that the young Akamichi heir was close by. Choji-kun, nice spar. I thought that leg sweep was really well timed. Really? Thank you, Choji said bashfully, walking over with Shikamaru in tow. Naruto did good, too. You've gotten a lot better since last year. Is that your own taijutsu style? It's the Uzumaki style, wave crest, Naruto chirped. Kanan wasn't sure if he would have been quite so bright if she hadn't been reborn into this world, but it was a far better situation than him being sabotaged his entire academy career. Kanan's family saved some of the scrolls from Uzushiogakure, and I've been working on them since we found out we were cousins. Cousins? Shikamaru straightened, and she figured that this was something new enough to catch his interest. The Hakuryu were a sub-clan of the Uzumaki, and our grandmothers were sisters. That's why my clan had some of the Uzumaki clan techniques, Kanan added. They were part of Oba-sama's dowry. I'm just glad I was able to give them to Naruto. It would have sucked if they'd been destroyed and left nothing for him. The Nara heir's eyes drifted off to the side, no doubt picking up on her hint. The flash of interest in his eyes deepened. Ah, makes sense. Family techniques are important to pass on. That's really cool that you found a cousin, Naruto, Choji was saying earnestly to the blissed-out blonde. Kanan had noticed that he had a weird reaction to her praise, and chalked it up to having not had family to praise him before. Anyo, maybe, sometime, you guys would like to go hang out after school with Shika and I? We found this cafe with really good dango. Really? And of course, Naruto went and did the watering puppy eye act, which was super effective with his gorgeous blue eyes. She swore he had caught onto their power and was now practicing them. Even Shikamaru winced and reassured Naruto that the invitation was serious. The eyes were just that effective. Naruto couldn't help but tense up as they entered the cafe behind Choji, his experiences with pretty much every place except Tuchi's ramen stand being decidedly negative. Hand reaching out to grab Kanan's for comfort, he was surprised when none of the employees even made faces when they saw him. He thought he might come here again if things didn't go south. I love the atmosphere of this place, Kanan mused, taking in the earthy tones and vivid green plants everywhere. Very relaxing. Reminds me of Benio Itoko's favorite wall hanging, the one Nijire Ba-san made? Naruto struggled to remember the extensive family tree on Kanan's side. Yeah, maybe sometime you can come over to our apartment and I'll show you. The golden-eyed girl offered a curious Choji. Maybe a study session, if that's alright. Troublesome? Shikamaru mumbled as they chose a booth to sit at, sliding in next to his friend across from the cousins. But it can't be any worse than my mother hounding me about homework. Naruto briefly wondered what that would be like, before pushing the painful thought aside. Well, we have a ton of comfortable cushions we usually lay out on to study, so there's that. What days are you all free? Choji and Kanan laughed at that, and Naruto found himself relaxing. It wasn't like he didn't consider the two boys his friends, they just weren't close. He was sure they really didn't mind him, and now he thought it might be nice to get to know them properly. He'd discovered just how amazing it was to have a friend that truly cared about you, thanks to Kanan, and was hopeful to gain more real friends before they graduated. They each ordered a different type of sweet dango for Choji, some sort of coffee cake for Shikamaru, a rich chocolate multi-layered monstrosity for Kanan, and Naruto picked out some sort of sweet roll with icing on it and settled in to chat. Well, everyone but Shikamaru, who looked to be napping, leaned against the booth's chair with his eyes half open. Naruto needed to know how he did that. It looked useful. Against Ino, Kanan-san, that's the first time I've ever seen her go down so fast. Just Kanan is fine, Choji-kun, I'd like for us to be friends. There was that butter wouldn't melt in my mouth smile from his dear cousin, though there was no doubt she was being sincere. She was still trying to find her real smile again and tended to get the practiced ones mixed up still. And she underestimated me. If she hadn't, I think she would have dodged that. Ino is pretty fast, Naruto reluctantly allowed. He still didn't like the other blonde all that much, but he could see talent. Ino's words were her main weapon, though, like the spies in Tamaki Oji-san's novel collection. Maybe, but she doesn't hit that hard, so you still would have won, though it would have taken longer. She just doesn't have the strength to take you down, and you have more stamina than Ino does. You would have outlasted her, and since you're faster and more agile, you could have gotten her out of the ring easily even if you didn't go for a KO. Choji nodded slowly, eyes wide as the dead last analyzed his childhood friend. I guess. Ino doesn't like to train much. Hopefully she'll grow out of that. Kanan grimaced, golden eyes flickering with old grief. Better to grow out of it quickly than find herself in a bad situation she can't fight her way out of. Naruto squeezed her hand, his own grief secondhand but no less for it. He knew Kanan blamed herself for being too weak to help her clan, to know what was going on while she was off checking the snares. Anyways, what do you guys like to do for fun? Kanan asked, ending that line of talk. While she and Choji quickly fell into a passionate conversation about cooking and baking, Naruto glanced over at Shikamaru, who was still, probably, asleep. Snorting, he took another bit of his sweet roll and occasionally chimed in with his own opinion on whatever food item his cousin and Choji were currently discussing. And if he not so subtly asked her to make cookies for that study session, well, nobody protested. Besides, he even offered to help. Shikaku waited patiently as his son picked at his dinner, eyebrows furrowed and thought. Yoshino just looked between the two and sighed, settling back in her chair to wait for Shikamaru to crack. Fortunately for the parents, it didn't take long. Hakuryu Kanan, she's far more advanced than the rest of the class. If she fought the Uchiha she'd likely win with ease. She said something concerning today. Oh? Shikaku said blandly. They were talking about her sparring match with Ino today. She won instantly, and when Choji mentioned that Ino didn't like to train, she said she hoped Ino grew out of it. She said, better to grow out of it quickly than find herself in a bad situation she can't fight her way out of. Like Hakuryu had already been there. The Junin commander sighed, having hoped that particular topic wouldn't come up, but knowing his son he would have figured it out eventually anyways. At least this way he wouldn't try to pry for information from little Kanan-chan. Her clan were wanderers, they were slaughtered by a group of bandits led by Nukanen. She, like the Uchiha boy, is the last of the Hakuryu clan. Shikamaru fidgeted, something so rare that Shikaku blinked in surprise. The boy sighed. Logically, I'm aware of what being a shinobi means, and that our lives are at risk. It just didn't sink in until now, with Hakuryu talking about Ino's behavior. I mean Ino's annoying but I don't want her to get hurt like that. I'll talk to Kunoichi about it, Shikaku promised, proud of his son for the concern he was showing his future teammate. He still worried that the next Ino Shika Cho team wouldn't mesh well fast enough, but at least this was progress, and really, Kunoichi should have known better than to allow the fangirl behavior to continue. Kanan barely repressed a groan at the high-pitched squeals of the fangirls when Sasuke walked into the classroom. It was too early for this. Naruto shared a look of misery with her right. His hearing wasn't quite as good as Kiba's, but still a lot better than most of their classes. I swear, even if one of them does end up on a team with Short, Dark and Broody, they're gonna get him and themselves killed by screaming and announcing their presence to enemy ninja, she hissed, annoyed. She didn't mind the giggling, their own fault if they didn't want to take training seriously, but the squeals were too much. Maybe the Teme would make it, but they'd all drag him down. They'd get off way before he could finish the fight, Naruto muttered back. So maybe they were both really ticked off now, 6 months into their last year at the academy, totally done with the fangirls. Not to mention the fact that the cousins were training themselves ragged in their free time. Not only were they working on learning basic fuinjutsu, they were working to master their current level of kenjutsu. And then Naruto had picked out a Naginata, the crazy boy. He was terrifying with it thanks to the tips from some passing Junin and one eager Chunin that had gushed over the weapon's quality. Learning at least 3 each of wind and water release jutsu from the clan library. With tips from Asuma sensei. And working to master the few combination techniques with their dragon partners they'd learned so far. It had been a bittersweet moment. After the mess with Kanan's personal summon confirming the fate of the clan after so many names had faded from the master summoning scroll. The deep midnight blue Aoi having destroyed a good portion of the never-used training ground they'd claimed for themselves. The blonde meeting his summon for the first time. Momo was one of the youngest dragons, her scales a pale off-white with the edges lined in a vivid red-orange. She was a lively one, and loved Naruto to bits. He'd also received the tribal-style summoning tattoo that, like Kanan's, was kept hidden under a wide leather cuff. Like they needed any extra attention. They trained with their summons 4 days a week, and their schedules had been fit to burst except the few afternoons they spent hanging out with Choji and Shikamaru. Kanan had attempted to be polite to Sakura, only for the other girl to go freaking ballistic and rant about Sasuke this and rivalry that. Except the only rivalry Kanan would have been interested in wasn't romantic in the least. Gods, she hoped she wouldn't be on a team with that pink-haired banshee. She didn't want Naruto with that girl, either. A team with Hinata would be nice. Kanan had been making excellent headway with chatting with her during lunch without the Hyuga stuttering. Now she just had to get those stutters to go when they were around Naruto. Hinata was actually sharp and witty underneath all that shyness, and when she got really ticked she could slam out some devastating comebacks. The one whispered verbal smackdown Naruto had overheard had him mouthing it back from behind the shy girl's back, blue eyes wide and delighted. Sighing, Kanan shook her head. She just had to make it through the rest of this school year, and then pray for a decent team. Preferably with her cousin. Zoning back in on Iruka-sensei because Mizuki-sensei was half a bastard on a good day and the cousins were dedicated to ignoring every noise out of his mouth as he began the day's lecture. Kanan leaned on Naruto's shoulder. He shifted to make it easier, since he was a few inches taller. Meaning they were both terribly short, but there wasn't much they could do about it. Now, one of the biggest advantages Konoha shinobi had on the battlefield. I wish they'd talk about Uzushio, she breathed. She'd been born after the remains of the clan had already settled into their nomadic way of life, and had never seen it in person, but the family photo albums had many pictures. Not only that, but journals of their ancestors had detailed many tactics, strategies, and techniques that she and Naruto had both been eager to commit to memory. Techniques that seemed to give a far better advantage than the ones Iruka-sensei was teaching them now. Maybe someday, the blonde replied wistfully, just as quiet. He rested his head against hers, but both made sure to pay attention. They'd found that their teachers wouldn't call them out so long as they looked focused and took notes, and Kanan had discovered that Naruto did well with a few note-taking styles from her original life's world. Not so slowly, but definitely surely, her boisterous cousin was catching up and beginning to surpass their peers. She scribbled a few more notes about using the land to one's advantage. Basic but important. Maybe she should start showing Naruto more of the traps she learned for hunting. He'd be able to make a prank out of them, and from those, more complicated, more lethal traps for when they were in hostile territory. One thing was certain, whether it was the fox's influence or not, Naruto had a well-hidden sadistic streak and she was sort of hoping that it was revealed sooner rather than later. So maybe she wanted to see the blood drain from Sakura's face upon realizing just how dangerous and skilled her cousin really was. "Hello, Hokage-sama." "Hello, Kanan-chan." The old man gave her a tired smile, entering the apartment when she invited him inside. "How are you and Naruto doing?" "Well, we're studying some of the ceiling primers right now, but in general we're doing well. Naruto's grades are finally up to an acceptable level even with Mizuki-sensei trying to mark him down for even the tiniest mistake." Hiruzen raised an eyebrow at that, making a mental note to look into the state of the academy. "I'm glad to hear all his hard work is paying off. I hope you haven't been testing those seals unsupervised?" "Gigi." Naruto bounded to his feet. "No, we've only been studying and sketching them with pencils. No chakra, we promise." Chuckling at his adopted grandson's buoyant nature, Hiruzen took a seat when offered, taking in the bright and cluttered living space. It wasn't messy, but full, many colors and patterns weaving together into a place that radiated home. It was so like Kushina's home, and he wondered if all the clans that had been of Uzushio had the same tastes and habits. There was even a plate of the coveted whirlpool biscuits set on the coffee table, one of the recipes he'd thought had been lost with the village as well. If there were allowable regrets other than the loss of too many lives and a shining culture, it was the little things that were part of that. The seal-inscribed marionettes and puppets, the never-ending music of Uzushio, the food always willingly shared. The old man felt yet another wave of relief that clearly, not all of it was lost. Accepting one of the whirlpool biscuits with hidden glee, he eyed the two children contemplatively. Going by the reports of the Anbu he had watching Kanan, they were advancing far beyond his expectations, feeding off each other's support and encouragement, and he had been debating restructuring the already proposed teams, should all considered students graduate. He had realized it would be detrimental to their growth and to the future forces of Konoha to separate them. With a competitive teammate and the proper sensei, these two could be part of a team that would be devastating in the field. "I'm sure that we can find some proper supervision for you to practice your fuinjutsu," Hiruzen mused, refocusing on the present. "Although perhaps your genin team's sensei will do that for you, it won't be that long till the graduation exams. As long as they don't make a fuss over us not using the standard bunshin," Kanan said with some irritation. "Mizuki-sensei gets mad when we use Mizu bunshin in class assessments." Thinking about the investigation that was currently going on involving that man, Hiruzen simply said, "I'll make sure it isn't a problem." After all, Mizu bunshin are effective tools, more so than the academy bunshin jutsu. "I wouldn't worry about it." She studied him for a moment, eyes searching, before they gleamed in interest and understanding. "A smart one, that child." "Yes, Hokage-sama, I'm definitely gonna pass this time." "Gigi," Naruto vowed, clenching his fists. "I'll be a shinobi that makes Konoha proud." "I know you will." Naruto-kun, Hiruzen smiled gently. Just like his parents. Alright class, settle down, Iruka said sharply. It was the day of the graduation exam, and half the class was being rowdy while the other half were impatient to get started. Naruto and Kanan belonged to the latter, and the young blonde was practically vibrating with repressed nerves. He knew he was capable of passing, but the previous years had been hard on his self-esteem, and the last thing he wanted to do was disappoint his cousin. He was praying hard that they ended up on the same team, not wanting to be with anyone else even though he knew he would have to deal with what he got. He started the written exam as soon as they were given the order to begin, using the tricks Kanan had taught him for reading so he didn't get impatient and accidentally miss parts of the questions. Thanks to all the studying they did, he could only feel relief at knowing he would be able to answer the questions, everything on the test having been covered by their study sessions. Then came the taijutsu part of the exam. He was set to spar Iruka-sensei, to either last the 5 minutes without getting tossed out of the ring, get Iruka-sensei out of the ring, or emulate an obvious kill shot. A little put out that he wouldn't get to see Kanan fight Mizuki Teme since they were fighting at the same time, Naruto still gave it all. His family's style was something he adored, loving the freedom to swing around his sensei's leg, outstretched for a kick, using the momentum to both send the man off balance and pull himself up to send a kick himself. Flipping over an extended arm to dodge a punch, tapping the base of his sensei's neck as proof that in real combat he could have killed him right then. Not that he ever would want to kill Iruka-sensei, but the point was that he was capable of getting to an enemy's weak point. He passed the spar with 4 minutes to spare, beaming as Iruka-sensei said he was proud of him. Trotting over to his cousin, he asked about her own spar, shivering when she only grinned wickedly and motioned to the limping instructor they both hated. Oh excellent. They both did perfectly on the shuriken and kunai throwing tests, and Naruto could only mentally thank Kanan for the intensive training she had him do the past months. He wouldn't have gotten this far without her, he was certain. And all those months of painful, bloody fingers was absolutely worth seeing the Uchiha's angry glares. This exam might just be what Naruto needed to take the top spot at the last moment. Then came the final part, the ninjutsu portion of the exam. They were called into the classroom one by one to take it, and because they were called in alphabetical order, his cousin went long before he did. She didn't take long, coming out with a shiny Hite 8 on a scarlet headband. Before being shooed out to where the other graduates were waiting, Kanan came over to him, pressing a kiss to his forehead. You've got this, cousin, just take a few deep breaths and give it your all. With that, she left, and Naruto felt his nerves calming from her words. She was right, he'd worked so hard for this, he'd trained endlessly to gain control over his frankly ridiculous chakra reserves, and had spent weeks on end working to get the academy jutsus down to one-hand seal. He was ready, so he went in that room with his head held high, pulling off the best henge, kawarimi, and mizu bunshin he'd ever done to date. His eyes watered when Iruka-sensei handed him a shining Hite 8 on the same red fabric as Kanan's. Naruto noticed that there were no other red ones, and quietly asked about it. That's the same red as your mother's hair, Iruka-sensei whispered. He flushed a bit at the thought of his teacher giving them something to remind them of the Uzumaki blood in them both, thanking him again before he made his way out to the front of the academy where Kanan was waiting for him. Seeing the Hite 8 in his tight grip, she grinned, sweeping him into a hug. Congratulations, she said softly, only pulling away to wave at Shikamaru, Choji, Hinata, and Shino. Naruto wasn't sure when she'd had time to get to know Shino much, but every so often she would talk to the Aburame during class. They weren't close, but he was pretty sure they counted as friends. You too, he beamed, grabbing her hand. They should celebrate properly, maybe make something extra rich for dessert. He knew she'd been planning some sort of quadruple chocolate cake recipe and he was eager to try it out. Team assignments are in a week, right? So we still have time to finish perfecting those last few techniques. They'd been trying to make sure they had a near-perfect grasp on their current skill set before getting a Junin sensei, not wanting to overreach themselves. What they already had was impressive for fresh genin, anyways, and that wasn't even including their summons. We do, if we're efficient about it, she mused, tangling their fingers together as they began to make their way home. That's for later, though. For now we're going to make the biggest freaking dinner ever and make so many cookies we won't be able to finish them all. Can we make that chocolate cake instead? Kanan laughed, the sound bright and much lighter than the first few months right after they'd met. It always made him so happy to hear it. That real laugh made him think of how lucky he was that she had survived and been brought to Konoha, that he had family that lived. Naruto loved Kanan something fierce. Her pain was his pain, and in his mind there was family, and then there was family. A family was close bonds and, I would die for you to live. But family was, I would raise this world to the ground should it dare to harm you. My soul is yours and yours is mine. Our traditions won't be forgotten and neither will the subtle patterns of your chakra so long as we're family. From the Hakuryu records and the few Uzumaki records he'd inherited, that was how a true clan worked. Clans like the Hyuga and the Uchiha seemed to have forgotten a lot of the vows they made when they were first formed. And the latter clan had certainly paid for it, from the rumors of how the eldest son of the clan head had snapped and gone on a murder spree. But Naruto would never dare forget all that made him who he was, and all that connected him to Kanan. It was more than blood that made a family, after all. The records he had indicated that the Uzumaki archives, which he suspected were still well and ready to be opened. His clan would never leave something so precious vulnerable to outsiders. There would no doubt be blood seals and nasty traps of all sorts waiting for anyone who dared to attempt to steal from them. Held more information about family and its relation to nature, chakra and senjutsu. Momo had implied he would learn more about it eventually, and he was absolutely interested. But until then, he would work hard to keep up the bonds of his small but still ever so precious family, and to make Kanan happy. Momo had secretly confided in him that despite his clan being slaughtered and scattered, he was still the heir and technically acting clan head. As such, it was part of his duty to ensure that any and all members of his clan and sub-clans were taken care of, be it physically, mentally, and/or emotionally, as well as financially. He was going to find whoever remained, and he was going to rebuild the clan. But he had to start out by taking proper care of Kanan, or he wouldn't be worthy of the position. That's part of why he had worked so hard, stopped focusing so much on pranks in favor than their more dangerous relative, traps, and pushed himself to mature that little bit more. Since Kanan had agreed to the cake, they walked home in a happy, content silence. Things were going to plan so far, he just needed to keep putting in the work. Kanan heard the alarms that night, rolled over on the soft and plush rugs they'd laid out in the living room after their celebratory dinner, and smirked as she saw her cousin sprawled out like a starfish, drooling slightly. Naruto was safe from Mizuki Tami's manipulations. Sure, he wouldn't learn the Kage Bunshin for a while, but she had little doubts that her cousin could weasel it out of Kakashi one way or another eventually. Momo, I swear, if you take a cookie from my plate one more time. Kanan snorted from her perch on the cushy armchair, glancing over at her cousin and his summon. It was a shame Aoi was so huge, or she would do the same, but he would break their apartment. As it was, Momo was rowdy enough that it was for the best. 2 hyper dragons was not something she wanted to deal with. It was the early morning of the day they were going to receive their team assignments, and they were finishing checking their gear in case of any impromptu tests by their Junin sensei. Kanan had already made both breakfast and bentos for lunch, along with the rest of the peanut butter cookie dough that had been in the fridge. With their things packed, thank God that they'd finally mastered storage seals. She knew the jutsu that let her stitch them into their clothes thanks to her mother. They were now just waiting for it to be time to head to the academy. But you have the entire plate of cookies. That's no fair. Momo howled, trying to weave around Naruto's hands that guarded the plate. Just let her have a couple, Naru, you shouldn't be eating so many in one go anyways. Do you really want to deal with a sugar crash on today of all days? Naruto pouted at her, but relented and put the plate back on the coffee table so his summon could grab a paw full. Momo did so with a cry of joy, stuffing the cookies in her mouth, finally settling down. The cousins shared a fond look before moving to check over their things one last time. When it was time to go, they bid Momo goodbye and the young dragon unsummoned herself. Activating the security seals as they left like always, the 2 new genin eagerly made their way to the academy, hand in hand. Their linked arms swung between them as they jogged, and Kanan couldn't help but smile at the wide beam on her cousin's face. She just hoped they were on the same team. They were among the first few graduates to enter the classroom. Waving to Iruka, Kanan led her cousin off to the far side of the classroom and slid into her chosen seat. Naruto followed, absently tapping the back of her hand with his thumb as he eyed the list that Iruka held, as if he could force it to tell him his team through sheer will and eye contact. Fortunately, it didn't take long for everyone to arrive, and Kanan couldn't help leaning forwards in her seat once Iruka had finished his speech and begun reading off the teams. Both she and Naruto waited with bated breath as the team numbers rose higher, and then, Team 7 will be Uzumaki Naruto. She gripped her cousin's hand tighter. Hakuryu Kanan. He let out a low hiss of triumph, beaming. Uchiha Sasuke. They heard cries of disappointment, but Kanan was wide-eyed, as Iruka kept going. And Haruno Sakura. As this is a somewhat unusual situation with 4 genin, your main Junin sensei will be Hitaki Kakashi, and occasionally a Tokubetsu Junin will come to assist. While Sakura crowed loudly about winning, and complained about Naruto, Kanan just twisted in her seat to meet her cousin's gaze. His blue eyes were bright, but narrowed, and she knew he understood that something odd was going on. Why all 4 of them? Going by the current scores, none of them were the dead last, and while theoretically they all had different potential skill sets, the truth was they would have 3 essentially front-liners and 1 meat shield, which meant the formula for their team had been altered drastically. At least we're together, Kanan mused, staying in her seat and waving out their friends as the other Junin sensei came to collect their teams. She flashed a sympathetic look at Shikamaru as he was dragged out behind Ino, to which he sighed at and lazily waved his hand, and waved cheerfully at Asuma, earning a grin in return. Hitaki, that sounds kinda familiar, Naruto frowned. He propped his elbows on the desk as he thought. Well, he is a well-known and powerful Junin, she replied as the room quickly emptied, causing Sakura to twist in her seat. Surprising, because it meant she had actually paused in her fawning over the Uchiha. Ignoring the Banshee, Kanan continued, going over everything she'd ever managed to hear about Kakashi during her time in the village. It's pretty much common knowledge that he was Anbu, and I heard he graduated the academy at 5, and made Chunin at 6. Public records place his promotion to Junin at 12, and I've heard several Chunin say he knows over 1,000 jutsu. He's been known as one of Konoha's greatest prodigies, but apparently he also has a bunch of bad habits like being really late to things and reading porn in public. Ew, Naruto wrinkled his nose, and she made a mental note to ask him just where he'd learned what porn was, never mind her casual use of the word. I guess people let things slide when you're that strong. She snorted. I think it's more of a case of who could actually force him to do anything, aside from Hokage-sama. Everybody else is too weak to bother trying. Are senseis really that strong? Sakura asked, seemingly uncertain before shaking it off and directing an adoring look at the Uchiha. Of course, they'd only give Sasuke-kun the best sensei. I wouldn't go that far, Kanan muttered, reaching for one of her stitched storage seals. Retrieving a small set of dull kunai and a whetstone, she set to sharpening them properly, just to give herself something to do while they waited. Naruto followed her lead, taking out a beaten leather journal written by their great-grandfather, who had been a sealing master. Uzumaki Inoue had written the journal for his children, and it had been passed down as a family heirloom due to the sheer amount of knowledge held within, not only focused on sealing. It was Naruto's favorite, content aside, because, as he'd admitted after the first time he read it, it felt like the man was teaching him in person. There were jokes and so many little side stories that you could almost hear the hearty laughter behind the written words. A brief glimpse into daily life in Uzushio, of a family that loved so passionately you couldn't help but get swept along. How much you wanna bet he'll be exceptionally late on purpose? She hummed. No bet, but we'll get him back later, Naruto said absently, a spare notebook in front of him as he jotted down yet more things he learned from the journal. A brief glance revealed that he was studying the basics for an advanced sealing matrix that was adaptable for anything from genjutsu to chakra filtration to storing actual jutsu as a nasty surprise to whatever unlucky soul happened to open a trapped scroll. She noted that her delightful cousin was actually in the process of designing a seal for said trapped scroll. Kami, she loved her cousin, she couldn't wait for him to use that. When her kunai were all sharpened, the sound having soothed her nerves from where Sakura's constant badgering of the Uchiha for a date had rubbed them the wrong way, Kanan resealed them and considered for a moment before deciding they probably had enough time. Shifting so she was cross-legged on her chair, she closed her eyes and began the meditation necessary for learning to use the full extent of her Kekkei Genkei. The Dragon Slayer bloodline was more of a blessing due to its origin. The first dragon to initiate a summon had overdone the senjutsu involved, turning their summoner into a human-dragon hybrid. Over the years the blood had thinned, but when active it was well within the holder's ability to train up to the point of full transformation at will. Kanan had activated her Kekkei Genkei when she'd been 5, startled by a wild boar, and her roar had given the thing a heart attack. They'd eaten well that night. The point was, she'd only had minimal training, because the clan hadn't wanted to risk attracting too much attention. She knew enough to hide it, but she was having to learn how to use it from scrolls and experimentation. The meditation exercise was to help her learn to draw out her scales from under her human skin. Like Aoi, her scales were a deep blue, edged in gold, and technically, her summon was a distant relative as well, because he was descended from that first dragon who had shared her blood with that first summoner. But unlike her partner, she did not have the armored feather-type scales. Hers were more like the Western dragons, with 4 limbs as well as wings, whereas the majority of the dragon summons were either full Eastern, with long bodies, antlers, and 4 small limbs, or amphitheres, wings only and feather-like scales. Aoi himself was an amphithere, unusual but still very powerful. Momo was full Eastern, though her antlers had yet to grow in. Thanks to their summons, she'd been able to begin getting the hang of the scale armor jutsu, but it was still far from combat ready. She still had to focus long and hard to bring up the scales of her Kekkei Genkei. The fangs and claws came naturally, as did the changes to her vocal cords for roars and growls, but the scales took much more effort. What the hell is that? Sakura cried, and Kanan sighed, opening her eyes to see just what had set the banshee off now. She was getting really annoyed by her. Blinking at the finger in her face, she scowled, leaning away. What are you going on about? Those scales? Sakura said, aghast. How rude. These are part of my Kekkei Genkei, Kanan said with false calm, reminding herself to be patient with this potential teammate. Please let Kakashi drop her after the real test. I'm training to manifest these scales as armor for the next stage. It's easier to test the different variations by bringing up small patches in multiple places. Oh, I didn't know you had a bloodline? That's because I don't bother to brag about it, she retorted. It means there's less of a chance of the information spreading before I wanted to. Better to take enemies by surprise and give them no chance to work out counters, Naruto added, still absorbed in the journal. He paused. Though there aren't exactly any counters for chakra-absorbing scales that are capable of deflecting blades, and pretty much everything else. So they're screwed anyways. Thank you for your vote of confidence, cousin. Your chains are coming along nicely, too, with those natural barriers and chakra-draining tendencies. Just because I accidentally activated that on you once. Kanan waved it off, secretly preening over Sakura's shocked gaze, and the disgruntled look the Uchiha sent over his shoulder that showed he was listening in. Ma, it's fine. A spar is a spar, and that was a valid move. I definitely prefer to watch it happen to someone else, though. Maybe our first C rank, if we encounter hostiles, Naruto shrugged. He'd come a long way from the boy who never once considered the violence of his desired career. He still hated the thought of killing others, but if it was down to one of his and the enemy, he would kill the enemy every time. I doubt we'll have any need of them on D ranks. Cammy, I hope you jinxed us, Kanan breathed, already dreading the low-ranking missions. Swhy I said it. Snorting, Kanan shifted in her seat, checking the clock. 2 hours, maybe we should start plotting to get back at our sensei. All the other teams have probably finished their first meetings by now. He is really late, Sakura allowed, and it seemed that for the moment she decided to take a break from asking out the Uchiha. The banshee hesitated before plowing forwards. So, how did you two improve so much this year? Naruto's been dead last for ages. Kanan glanced her cousin's way, and he made a slight, dismissive motion with his hand, absorbed in the journal. Holding back a sigh, she contemplated. For what little she remembered of her previous life, she knew Sakura and Sasuke had potential, no matter how much they annoyed her right now. And if they were, somehow, all going to be a team, it was better if she tried to get things on a better track from the get-go. It would be a lot of effort, but it could be worth the struggle and frustration. When I was brought back to Konoha by Asuma-sensei, she started, but paused, trying to figure out how to word it, because Sasuke was listening and this might be able to knock some sense into him if she did it right. My clan, okay, first, some background. The Hakuryu were a sub-clan of the Uzumaki, and when Kiri, Kumo, and Iwa joined forces to destroy Uzushiogakure, the Uzumaki fulfilled their vows by sacrificing themselves to ensure their sub-clans and civilian members were able to escape. The Hakuryu became nomads after that, but we were able to save some Uzumaki scrolls and such because my grandmother, Uzumaki Kotori, had them as part of her dowry when she married into the Hakuryu. My family, while somewhat trained as shinobi during our travels, it wasn't enough. They were slaughtered by bandits, led by Nukanen. I was the only survivor. She had to take a few deep breaths there, swallowing the lump in her throat because she had not talked about their deaths, only who they had been for Naruto to know them even secondhand. Sarutobi Asuma had been in the area. He avenged my family as soon as he realized what had happened, tracking and killing both bandits and Nukanen. I owe him much. He took the time to seal up all of my clan's belongings to bring back, along with me. It is thanks to him that I still have the many clan scrolls and training supplies carried by my family, and that I was able to share the Uzumaki ones with Naruto. We've used them to train ourselves, which I assume is why Naruto was finally able to catch up to where he should have been, had some of the academy teachers not tried to sabotage him. Naruto's hand on her shoulder, warm and grip firm, kept her grounded. A brief glance the Uchiha's way revealed that he was frozen in place, but his gaze met hers, and he slowly, hesitantly nodded, solidarity in suffering. She dipped her head back, acknowledging his pain despite her own feelings for how he dealt with it. Taking another deep breath, she turned back to Sakura. Were you asking in order to get ideas on how to train yourself? The girl's green eyes were wide, shocked, and maybe, just maybe, filled with slow realization as her gaze flickered between the two last of their clans. Yeah, Sakura said, voice cracking just slightly. Well, I can copy the scrolls that aren't clan-specific for you. They'll be better than what the library has for students and genin, I know that much. What you really need is a better diet plan. Kunoichi will burn a massive amount of calories when training properly, so you need the protein, vitamins and carbs of full meals. Otherwise your body will begin to strip what it needs from your muscles and bones, Kanan said flatly. You should probably be taking a daily multivitamin too, they have them specifically for Kunoichi. Long story short, if you don't have the fuel, you won't have enough energy to work. Kanan usually does protein-rich food for breakfast, carbs and starches at lunch, and a lot of veggies with dinner, Naruto offered. It works with our training routine, she nodded. The order means I have energy all day for both training and recovery. So breakfast is things like eggs, yogurt, some rice, and fruit. Lunch would be bigger with onigiri with meat, lighter fruit like berries, and carrots, and dinner is a bit smaller but with fish or red meat and rice. Lots of veggies like bell peppers, onions, peas, tomatoes, and corn. And during the day it's good to eat a lot of small snacks like nuts, citrus, and berries. That was detailed enough that Sakura would hopefully be able to make her own meal choices, but still give her a better idea of what she needed to be eating to make up for training. And, she added, you should be training physically for at least 6 hours a day, maybe not all at once but definitely in total. You would benefit from it the most out of all of us, as it'd help build up your chakra reserves to a level you could actually use for jutsu in combat. Running, climbing, and taijutsu should be your main focus, as your endurance is behind the rest of us. Maybe try training with a polearm, Naruto suggested. Your taijutsu is textbook, so it's really easy to counter you and overwhelm you with moves you've never seen before. Even a bow staff would give you some distance and leverage, you could probably get some good force behind one. You can find off-duty Chunin and Junin hanging out near the blacksmiths and supply district on the side closer to the training grounds. If you bring them food they're pretty nice about showing students the basics. That's how I got started with my naginata. My tanto and bow, too, Kanan nodded. Those were fairly recent, but they'd felt right. But in any case, there's a lot of resources once you know where to look. A lot of it will have to be done on your own time, though. I don't know what sort of training schedule Kakashi sensei will be planning to use. He might want to start us on protocols and stuff before getting into full combat training. That one Junin sensei that's always leading his team past our apartment had his team doing formations for weeks. Oh, that guy. Pretty sure the genin with the ponytail was about ready to scream, he was so sick of it. That's probably because he kept messing up, cousin. 6 hours? Sakura repeated, shocked. I typically train for 8 to 9, not including school, Sasuke interjected shortly, taking Kanan by surprise. That hadn't been bragging, almost reprimanding. And it shows, she allowed. Sakura-san, being satisfied with top Kunoichi in the academy is very different than putting in the effort to excel in the field. I know you didn't have the advantage of clan resources, but you're smart enough to make up the difference easy if you applied yourself. I'll get those scroll copies for you tomorrow, but I will say that if you want to not just survive, but thrive, you need to kick yourself into gear and really buckle down on self-training. We've got 3 self-trained powerhouses on this team already, and it won't be pleasant to be the one left behind. Give it your best, alright? Sakura blinked rapidly but nodded. Yeah, I can do that. Huh. Kanan had thought she'd be more, scream why about it? It's because you called her smart compared to clan kids, Naruto whispered, quiet enough that even with her enhanced hearing she had to strain to catch it. Ah, that would do it. I just think it's weird that there's 4 of us. I've heard of squads like this, but never a genin team, the blonde frowned. It is strange. Holy shit, he was participating. Isn't it just because there wasn't the right number of students to split it up evenly? Sakura questioned. There's no way every year has always had just the right amount of graduates, Kanan pointed out. They must have some way of cutting back on extras. Some kind of secondary test, maybe? If that's the case, we might have to prove that we deserve to be on the team, Naruto sighed. And whoever doesn't do that well enough to whatever standards they're using gets cut. So all 4 of us will have to prove our worth as both individuals and our worth as a 4-man team. Oh, don't give me those looks, she said, exasperated at Sasuke's incredulous glare and Sakura's apparently instinctive denial. Konoha is built on teamwork, and teams are created for specific purposes based on their combined skills. Ino-san, Shikamaru, and Choji are a team because their parents have proved their clan's skill sets form a formidable capture and intelligence gathering team. Kiba-kun, Shino-kun, and Hinata-chan are much the same, but as a tracking and retrieval team. So for what reason have the 4 of us been grouped together? Naruto, Sasuke-san, and I are all heavy hitters with a focus on close-range taijutsu and ninjutsu. Sakura-san has the best chakra control in class, which might mean they have her pegged as a genjutsu type or a possible medic. We're meant as a front-line team. Heavily combat-oriented, Sasuke muttered, deep in thought, eyes focused on Kanan. With Sakura as backup if she follows one of those training paths. So she's at the most risk of being cut from the beginning, because even standard front-line combat teams are rare. Which means she has to show some serious grit during whatever test we might have to take, and that she's capable of working with all of us, in groups of 2 or 3 or 4. And we'll have to do the same, to show that adding in an extra genin won't be a liability to the team, Kanan finished. Won't she, though? Sasuke scoffed, and yep, there it was. Only in the beginning, Naruto countered with a sharp look. Sakura-chan's smart, if she wants to she could catch up pretty fast. We'll only be doing D ranks for a while anyways, so it won't matter until we get our first C rank mission. How do you know so much about what we'll be doing? Sakura demanded suspiciously, arms crossed, but half of it was defensive anyways so Kanan ignored it. Because we've been actively seeking out shinobi to ask about what it's like being genin, and watching older genin teams while they do their D ranks, which are basically chores villagers pay us to do and are supposed to teach us teamwork and random skills we can use on future missions while letting us get paid, the blonde explained. We wanted to be as prepared as possible, so we wanted to know how much time we could expect for team training, and training on our own. Add in that apparently there are far more opportunities given to genin teams who excel in solid teamwork, making them, on average, much faster to reach Chunin and Junin and higher-level missions. Kanan threw in as bait for the now interested Uchiha. If she could disrupt his little obsession early, that would be great, though she didn't have much hope, but there was that one technique Uzumaki made but Hakuryu improved. Naruto was clearly thinking along the same lines, though without her extra knowledge. We don't have the time to get to know each other's style well enough, but... He glanced over at her. Tatakai no Ketsugo? Battle Bond. It's a method of chakra synchronization, Kanan said slowly. The Uzumaki and Hakuryu used it to great effect in the Second Shinobi War. Essentially, teammates let their chakra rise to just above their skin, and with the aid of a temporary seal make contact with the chakra of each of their teammates. It allows them to memorize both their chakra signature and wavelength, which makes them extra sensitive to it. It's supposed to give teammates a heightened awareness of each other and the mental and emotional state of your teammates, which on the battlefield translates to being near able to mind read each other's intents, so nobody gets in each other's way. It was ridiculously successful, but the records I have do indicate that it practically demands a certain level of trust, because once you've formed the bond it's there to stay. We definitely should discuss first, to make sure our goals and such aren't incompatible. The bond is basically like chakra adopting a cousin, and if someone doesn't want to either assist or at least stay out of the way of another's goal, it won't go well. I'll go first then, Naruto announced, finally tucking away the journal and his notes. Hi, my name's Uzumaki Naruto, I like ramen, family, training, and wind jutsu. I dislike assholes and people who judge what they don't know a damn thing about. My dreams and goals are to one day find any other survivors of my clan and bring them home, and to become Hokage, to protect Konoha and everyone inside it. I'm Hikaru Kanan, I like cooking and baking, family, training, and dragons, she followed without missing a beat, causing her cousin to cough harshly to hide a laugh. I dislike bandits, nukenin, and fangirls who refuse to improve themselves. My goal is to help Naruto re-establish the Uzumaki clan, and the Hikaru clan, and to become an S-ranked Junin at least. Because how else was she going to survive the bullshit to come? She turned to Sakura expectantly. Oh, I'm Haruno Sakura, the other girl began, rapid thoughts clear on her face as she recalibrated pretty much everything she'd once thought to be true. Or really just her own inaccurate conclusions of her classmates. I like reading and chakra theory. I dislike people who look down on me. My dream is, she hesitated for a very long moment, glancing at Sasuke but surprisingly not squealing or anything. Then she spoke the words that made Kanan wonder if the other girl was actually okay or if there was an imposter going around. I think I need to reconsider my dream a little, but my new goal is to learn more about genjutsu and medical jutsu. I'm not going to be cut from this team, she said more firmly, determination in her eyes. Uchiha Sasuke. I have no current likes, I don't care to go over my dislikes, at this time, he added after a long pause. He was struggling, but the miraculous thing was that he was trying. I have no dreams, only an ambition. To rebuild my clan, and avenge them by killing a certain man. Kanan raised her hand. Is this certain man a nukenin? A sharp nod was the reply. Sasuke-san, you have my support and assistance should you need it. Whether that be simply by being a good teammate to allow all of us to get the most and best opportunities we need to become stronger, or as backup when you are able to go hunting for that man. This startled him, and suddenly Kanan had to wonder just why not a single person in charge had missed the obvious solution to a traumatized Uchiha. Tell them you have their back, and are willing to be a stepping stone, should they need it. Even basic wording implying that the speaker knew that Sasuke would, eventually, be capable of his stated goal. It was the most blatant form of manipulation and still the boy fell for it, and fell hard, because that pleased smirk was not subtle in the least. Me too, man, if you need backup, or just making sure we keep getting promoted so you can go, I'll be there, Naruto promised easily. Sunshine boy, too kind, too pure. He was following her lead here, but his eyes had that same shine they did when he just got something he was learning from their records, showing that his instincts were on board and ready. Don't count me out, Sakura jumped in, not one to lose her chance. I'll get stronger so you can be sure I won't slow you down. Sasuke gazed over the three of them with an odd look on his face, before nodding. Fine, then let's do that battle bond, so we're ready for the test. Without a word Kanan turned to Naruto, who huffed before retrieving ink and a brush from one of his storage seals. The other two watched raptly as Naruto applied the simple, spiral-based seal to first his own hand, then hers, and then waited for their teammates to hold out theirs. Sasuke went first, inspecting the seal as Naruto quickly applied Sakura's. So now, all we need to do is bring out chakra all over our hand, and put our hands in a circle, like that, Kanan instructed, feeling the low hum of the other's chakra as her own rose to match. And move forwards so we're all touching at the same time. Needless to say, what happened next was very much unexpected. Kakashi took one look at the four children lying sprawled over a desk and the floor, and the still glowing seals on their joined hands that he recognized, and contemplated just walking right back out. How Naruto had even discovered the Tatakai no Ketsugo he wasn't sure, but he remembered Kushina and Minato's, and how it made them monsters on the battlefield. With a sigh, he settled on a nearby desk, watching carefully to ensure that the four genin hopefuls were still breathing properly. The seal would hold them together for as long as it took for their chakra to synchronize. He never would have expected or even wanted them to use such a seal, ease of use regardless. There were some risks that he, himself, had found too much. One of which included the fact that should one of the bonded die, the backlash could be horrific for the others. Teamwork and familial bonds of the level the bond brought were rare, and coping the loss of teammates without such a bond was hard enough. If he hadn't known that it was impossible to stop once begun, he would have ripped them apart and dragged them over the coals for what must have been a spur-of-the-moment decision. As it was, they were going to have to deal with Enbu Captain Inu once the bond was finished and they were aware of their surroundings again. Stupid fucking kids. He just hoped that it would improve the brats as a team instead of making them hate each other for their own dumb decision. At first it felt normal. Then intriguing, the different sensations that marked their chakra as other, and not their own. And then, something sort of gave, and it was everything at once, all that I, you am, or ever will be, and it was blinding, overwhelming, sense and tastes and sounds and sights from 4 very different lives. A jumbled mess of that's you not me and who the hell experienced this and that son of a bitch. We'll get him for sure and holy shit that's a big dragon. Barriers were breaking, old wounds uncovered to sting anew, the old dull ache of loss suddenly brought back to vivid sharpness with a vengeance. But there was balm, too, in the form of peaceful, warm memories, of hope, of alone we crumble but together we can level mountains. The whirlwind of shared memories slowed to stop, then reversed. Everything that had flowed into the circle that now bound them redirected back to where it came from, leaving behind small pathways if again they were needed along with a calming sense of wholeness. Naruto was the sun, a blazing center of guidance with the power to illuminate even the darkest of paths. Sasuke was the moon, watching over the shadows in a darker but no less strong counterbalance to the first. Sakura was the earth, solid and steady beneath their light, by first one then the other in turns, nurturing growth and power. Kanan was the sky, the one that eased the connections with knowledge gained from watching over their journeys as they spun through space, providing protection and perspective when needed. Each had a role, each was part of their whole. They were most effective together, even when the sun scorched, the moon went dark, the earth heaved, and the sky rumbled. They could hurt and heal each other in turns, all had its place in the cycle they found themselves in. There was a swell of uncertainty before an almost unanimous, fuck it, from all 4 chakra sources. Past life from another fucking planet where we were a manga and you didn't exist? Cool, magic intelligence gathering. Have a giant evil, for now, furball in your gut? Cool, that's an advantage at some point. Been grieving and obsessed with a man you just found out was never actually a murderous monster. So now your plans of revenge are shattered beyond repair, along with your psyche? Cool, we'll pick up the pieces and build you better. Have a split personality and it's violent as fuck? Cool, we all have issues, you'll fit right in. Let's get started. Naruto dry heaved, having to force down his breakfast again while he tried to ease the disorientation. They'd been so close, like one, and suddenly stuffed back into a body that felt too hollow in comparison. His fingers clutched tightly around several others as he staggered to his feet, blue meeting spinning red and black and Sasuke, he managed to exhale. Your eyes. The other's free hand flew up as if he could check them that way, only to shudder. Itachi. Ni-san. He didn't, he was crying. Standing back to let Kanan step around the desk and pull the black-haired boy into a hug, which he near collapsed into with a choked sob, Naruto's lips pressed into a thin line. It was Sakura who swapped placed with her, gingerly pressing against his side, not a hug but simple pressure. It was new, but at the same time it felt like things were always meant to be this way. He kept his eyes on Sasuke's trembling form, trusting that Kanan had him handled but also still wanting to be sure to witness, because so many had turned away. He snaked an arm around Sakura's, and she allowed it with a small noise as she watched too, before she led them both back around the table so they could wrap around Sasuke as if the 3 of them were enough to shelter him completely. Because, out of all of them, he hurt the worst. Kanan was able to understand him better than the other 2, but even she had flat out told Naruto that she wouldn't have recovered as well as she did without the blonde's optimism. Hopefully he'd be able to help Sasuke too. We're going to fix it, he vowed, voice raspy. All of that, we're not going to break. We'll get stronger, together. Starting with Sasuke making that damn appointment with a therapist, Kanan said, deceptively calmly. There would be no arguing with her, not with her using that tone, and the Uchiha seemed to sense this, because he just scowled into her shoulder, though the effect was ruined because he was still a little weepy. It's for your own good, man. You'll get better faster without all that shit dragging you down. And you, Sakura, need to fucking eat. Like immediately. Here, try this, he said, retrieving a bag of Kanan's trail mix out of a storage seal under his sleeve hem and shoving it at his teammate. She took it without protest. Kanan, after we meet with our Junin sensei, can you look over all our training routines and see what we can help each other with? She was actually pretty amazing with that, as well as finding the right niche for others. And she had this way with teaching that made it so interesting you just had to give it your all, or he never would have managed passing the academy. Of course, cousin. In fact, I think I have just the thing for both of them to start on. None of you will be starting on anything until we've discussed exactly what sort of stupid stunt you just pulled. An absolutely furious voice growled from near the door. Naruto whirled, pushing Sakura behind him in the same movement and seeing his cousin do the same for Sasuke out of the corner of his eye. Taking in the dark, ice-cold eye visibly, the tense shoulders and silver hair, he fought the urge to cringe. That was Hokage Kakashi, he knew, and it appeared their Junin sensei was pissed. In the back of his mind, his bloodline surged not so much a Kekkei Genkei, like Kanan's, but more the deeply ingrained instincts passed down among the ruling line of the Uzumaki, hinted to be sage-related by Momo, and Naruto bared his teeth, feeling chakra in his eyes, not a dojutsu, just a trick he and Kanan had worked out weeks ago based on their summons jutsu to make their eyes glow eerily. Perhaps it was hasty, Naruto allowed, his bond to Momo tightening as she felt his defensiveness, but not stupid. Not for the four of us. We needed it. Sasuke's words cut through the growing tension with surprising ease, even as he continued. We would have been doomed from the start without the bond. Without it breaking Itachi's genjutsu, I would still. On your feet, brats. Uchiha, you're going to meet with a Yamanaka immediately, if you've been under a genjutsu this whole time. The rest of you as well, given the nature of that bond. Kakashi motioned sharply with his hand, and the young genin hopefuls started moving, not wanting to farther irritate this man who was radiating danger. Naruto squared his shoulders and kept his head high, not wanting his teammates to worry too much. Following his lead, Kanan quickly helped Sasuke clean up his face and cast a very minor, subtle genjutsu that hid the puffiness and red-rimmed eyes for the moment. After a moment they all seemed to feel the same twist to their bond, adjusting accordingly, Sasuke swapping with Sakura to walk beside him, with the girls directly behind and farther away from Kakashi. The Junin clearly noticed but said nothing. Instincts, honed by long hours of training with his dragon partner, had him wary, but knowing better than to piss off the most powerful person in the room. Of course, Naruto had more chakra, but Hokage Kakashi had leagues more skill and mastery over said skills. Given that he was an S-ranked Junin, at least, there were sure to be more things about the man that even the blonde's sneakiness couldn't access. So the kids kept their mouths shut, and tried to adjust to the subtle thrum of their new bond. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.